And now, aviation weather around Alaska. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, bringing you now your aviation weather outlook for the state of Alaska coming up here the next couple of days. And when we look ahead to Thursday morning, there's going to be an area of low pressure sitting out here across the lower end of the Alaska Peninsula. Central pressure as we've gone through, say, Wednesday afternoon into early Thursday morning, down around 980 millibars with the frontal system extending up along the Gulf Coast. We expect some gale force winds along this front, along with areas of moderate to locally heavy precipitation. Farther north, a ridge of high pressure will extend from eastern Russia across the North Slope Brooks Range down into northwest and central Canada. And colder air will reside here across the mainland interior and areas up along the Arctic and northwest Arctic coast. For Thursday afternoon, IFR conditions rather extensive across the Gulf from the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, in through the entire Panhandle. We do see pockets of IFR along the North Slope and areas toward Dead Horse, New Exit. This is some moisture that's just kind of lagging along a trough, despite we have weak high pressure across that area. And then for Friday morning, we find IFR increases a bit there along the North Slope. We expect some lower ceilings and even a little light snow up that way in areas. And then further south, widespread IFR conditions across the Panhandle for Friday morning, extending back up into areas of the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, and all the way up to the 40-mile Gold Country. This is moisture that's been forced northward into the colder air as this main low sits out here out over the southeast corner of the Bering. It's forcing moisture further north, and as we go into the weekend, there'll be another low pressure impulse kind of spin up and pull into the central northeastern Gulf Saturday, and then another one coming on up as we go into early next week around Monday. So this kind of acts as a pinwheel. This older system will just kind of decay, and then a couple newer impulses will come up one Saturday and then by early next week. And IFR conditions will persist along areas of the Brooks Range North Slope, but at least a little less so. Perhaps Yukon Flats here toward the Alcan border along the Alaska Range. And then the coastal mountains here, St. Elias, Wrangell Mountains, into much of the Panhandle, eastern portion of the Gulf for Friday afternoon. So past conditions for Thursday, we're looking at IFR conditions along the North Slope as you fly north of Anatuvik Pass. Otherwise, along the path we expect MVFR conditions throughout Thursday. Same thing, Adigan Pass. As you fly north there in the north entrance, you'll encounter IFR over the North Slope. Generally, MVFR conditions along the length of the pass. Lake Clark and Merrill, in the west arm of the Alaska Range, MVFR conditions Thursday. Same thing, Rainy Pass. Windy Pass may start out at least Thursday morning with VFR giving way to MVFR conditions. Isabel Pass will see VFR give way to IFR conditions as that moisture lifts further northward, associated with the moisture coming in there off the Gulf Coast with that frontal system. And then Mentasta Pass, VFR conditions will become MVFR during the day Thursday. Further southwest, Tanita Pass will see MVFR become IFR conditions with lower ceilings and some precipitation moving into there. Portage Pass will be socked in with IFR conditions, especially there out over Prince William Sound. The far west end, as you get west of the west entrance there, MVFR conditions. And then Chilkoot and White will see MVFR conditions early Thursday, drop down to IFR conditions by the time we get into Thursday afternoon. Looking at freezing levels at the surface freezing line runs around the Bering Strait, dropping into the southwest interior, along the Alaska Range, Talkeetna Mountains, intercoastal mountains here of the northeastern Gulf, northern Panhandle. Highest freezing levels aloft are out over the Gulf, generally at or above 8,000 feet, rising upwards to 10 and even 12,000 feet there as you get toward Dixon Entrance and Haida Gwaii, and a pocket of cooler air aloft associated with the low pressure that's sitting over this region on Thursday morning. Greatest threat for icing Thursday will be along areas of the northeastern Gulf, generally above 8,000 feet because of that feed of warm, moist air being drawn in, creating some heavier coastal rains and then some heavier mountain snows. And as that moisture gets pulled back to the north and west and into the mainland interior. There's plenty of cold air, so what we expect to find along the Alaska Range up in the 40-mile Gold Country, there's going to be areas of snow and lower ceilings, freezing, icing likely above 4,000 feet there. And then as we trail off back toward the southeast Bering from Bristol Bay back toward St. Paul, there could be moderate icing above 6,000 feet. Here are the upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet. We have a jet core, anticyclonically curved jet core, well in excess of 120 knots here up over far northern Canada, the Canadian Arctic coast. Southwest winds upwards of 70 to 85 knots coming in off of the Gulf. And for 700 millibar level at 9,000 feet, we see a broad belt of winds 45 to 60, 70 knots being pulled in along the panhandle from off of the Gulf and coming inland to British Columbia, lower Yukon, Northwest Territories. Here's the low circulation in the mid-levels at 9,000 feet, and we see pretty strong offshore flow here off the Yukon Delta around or just over 40 knots. And as we bring it down to 3,000 feet, you can see a core of winds 45 to near 60 knots here across the eastern half of the Gulf. Southwest winds moving right up into the northeastern Gulf Coast and Panhandle, so that'll lend towards some turbulence. There's the low circulation just north of the Alaska Peninsula in the southeast corner of the Bering. On the backside of it, brisk east-northeasterly winds 40 to 55 knots. Creating very strong offshore flow here across the northern Bering in the vicinity of St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, down along the lower Yukon Delta. As a result, we expect considerable moderate turbulence along areas of the west-southwest, even extending up into the middle Yukon Valley, surface to 4,000 feet, surface to 3,000 feet at St. Lawrence, St. Matthew, and St. Paul. Areas of the eastern central Aleutians, we're looking at surface to 3,000-foot moderate turbulence, surface to 4,000-foot moderate turbulence throughout the middle upper portion of the Alaska Peninsula, including Kodiak Island. And then areas along the Gulf Coast, we have Kenai Peninsula in the mountains there, extending through Prince William Sound, all along the Gulf Coast into at least the outer panhandle there. Surface to 6,000 feet, pretty good bet of some considerable moderate turbulence as a result of that front pushing up all along the length of the Gulf Coast.